When I knew about that guy with the glasses was, I was really into people like the Nostalgia Critic. Well, when I was on the site for the first time, when I was like exploring it, I knew about Nostalgia Critic, and that was it. That's all the videos I've watched because I didn't think anyone compared to him. And then a few years later, like I heard about this other show. Well, it was an older show, but I didn't know what it was. And I remember Doug Walker talking about it and his um, influential comedians or comedic influences in that video he did a few years ago. And the show was called Mystery Science Theater 3000. Now, I first heard this about the show in the Nostalgia Critic episode called Airborne. And at one point, the main character it's about this kid named Mitchell, and he and his love interest were just like at this museum, I think. And at one point, he just disappears, and the girl's looking over around her, and she's like, Mitchell, Mitchell, and then it cuts back to a Mystery Science Theater episode, and it's like Mitchell, like Joel and the robots actually were like Mitchell, and yeah, actually that's one of the few times I heard of them before what happened. Um, I remember hearing about them in Futurama, actually. Well, before that, um, actually way before the Star Trek, I think I heard about them, but I didn't get the reference in Futurama, where at one point the main characters are talking in the movie, and then it cuts to I think it was Joel in the box. I'm not sure if it was Joel. I knew it was Tom Servo and Crow. I knew it was them, but I didn't know who the guy was because like, was it Mike or Joel? It was one of them. I know it wasn't Jonah because like Futurama was Jonah came as a host before Futurama ended, with after Futurama ended twice. And the second time that's pretty much how I knew. But I didn't know the reference until I watched Mr. Sensei, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. And another time when I knew about Mr. Sensei, it was again Nostalgia Critic, and it was one of his top 10 F up in the Nostalgia Critic episodes. And I was like, oh, what's this? At one point, he made a mistake during the Barbarella, or I forgot, it was a Pamela Anderson thing, a Pamela Anderson movie, and it was more like he made a mistake by comparing, like, saying it was a bulldozer or a forklift, and he's like, everybody was like complaining about it, and he's like, and as many of you pointed out, I left out one of the most obvious jokes ever, and it cuts the mystery side. It was like, he tried to kill me with a forklift, and like, well, I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna check it out eventually. And I saw, and then a couple years later, I saw his comedic influences CD. I mean, not CD. His comedic influences video, and at one point he said Mystery Science Theater. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but okay, I'll watch it. And I tried to watch. I remember trying to watch like the first. Like, remember trying to watch it the same day I uploaded my last movie review, which was The Room. Amazingly enough, because that was the 100th episode. I tried to watch, but I'm like, I don't want to watch this. It seems a little too camp, in my opinion. This was me. It seemed a little too camp, and so I tried again. I remember going to the library. I'm like, okay, I'll just watch a few episodes. You know what? I'm gonna download a few episodes, and I'm just gonna go ahead and watch when I get home. So I downloaded up to 5 or 6 episodes at the library, and I came back here. And the first episode I watched, because it was one that seems most familiar, was what was it called? It was Mitchell. Uh, if you're gonna go into Mystery Science Theater, it's a great, like. Here's the thing. I remember laughing hard at that episode. I remember like first 5 minutes, I just kept like rewinding it, like playing it back every like 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is hilarious. Like I kept laughing at every single. Like I laughed a lot more than I thought I would, because it's like I like this better than Nostalgia Critic. This is amazing. This show's amazing. Why haven't I like watched this earlier? And I remember being right here, watching that episode. The first episode I watched all the way through, Halloween 2012. I had nothing to do, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch Mystery Science Theater, and I did it, and I ended up watching it, and I liked it. Now here's the thing, and I said this during live streams. If you're gonna start with Mystery Science Theater, don't start with Mitchell because you're you're gonna be confused. Like it's gonna be hilarious, but you're not gonna remember what's going on. Like it's like okay, if I just had to suggest a, an episode to start with Mystery Science Theater, I suggest Pod People. Mitchell is not a bad episode. It's actually really, really, really funny. It's just that when you get to the end of that episode and you don't know much about the characters, it's like, did I miss something? I don't know what's going on. Like I was really confused at that point. And then for about 3 months, like a couple of months afterward, while I was watching Mystery Science Theater over and over again, I didn't realize there were two hosts because it's like, okay, it's like I just thought they were the same person throughout. It's like, okay, Joel and Mike, I don't know what that is. Like I thought it was just Joel all this time, and it's like, oh no, oh no, this is a different person, and it's totally different in terms of like the humor. Like Joel is more laid back and deadpan, while Mike is more like straightforward and a bit insulting. But it's preferences. In fact, I actually got like I pretty much showed this in a video where I used to do book videos, where I actually have like a Mystery Science Theater book, but it only goes up to season 7. I know there's an updated version that goes up to season 10, or like throughout the whole run, because the Netflix revival hasn't made it updated yet, so it's like yeah, it's fine, and it's actually a good time capsule because it's a book that's from 1996, so it's like okay, it's like, eh. And I actually, as of right now, I actually ended up reading it a couple of days ago just to see how it holds up, and I actually really enjoyed laughing at it. And it's just, and the book actually goes to show how much appreciation goes into the show. And when I heard like there was going to be a Netflix revival, I'm like, okay, this is going to be pretty fun, and I actually really enjoyed it. Like the first season on Netflix is like, I actually really enjoyed that one, but oh my god, I actually have like I've kind of finally got my friend to watching Mystery Science Theater a couple of times. Like the first episode, I kept telling her the first episode she has to watch is Pod People because it's like an ET ripoff, but it's actually where they got really good. And what did she do? She ignores me and ends up watching an episode of the first season. I'm like, no, watch the episode of season 3, episode 3. Episode 3 of season 3. I kept telling her over and over and over again. Like, she's like, yeah, I'll get it. And then she ended up watching like the first episode. I'm like, the first episode of the first season, one of the first season episodes. I'm like, oh god, what did I tell you before? And she's like, oh, well. And then eventually we ended up watching her very first Mystery Science Theater episode, and it was the beginning of the end, mostly because it was on Netflix. I'm like, okay, this is one of my favorite episodes, anyways. And I don't think she got all the jokes. Well, whatever. I still laughed at it. And eventually, through Tumblr, I reblogged the Gauntlet episode, well, the Gauntlet trailer, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be pretty fun. And she is like, okay, I'm going to watch this eventually. And yeah, she only watched, the first 2 episodes, and I don't think she's watched the rest. So that's a given. And yeah, she hasn't watched, I don't think she watched the rest yet. But I remember her watch, I remember we both watched the first 2 episodes, but the first episode, which is the Mac and Me episode, really stands out because there's a running gag. Like it was the only movie I ever watched before Mystery Science Theater got to it. Like everybody knows who Mac and Me is, mostly if you watch Paul Rudd on Conan. Every time he introduces his own movie, it cuts to the kid in the wheelchair falling off the cliff, and then Mac comes out of nowhere and just looks at him, and you're like, okay, I gotta tell you, that alien is disgusting. Like I can barely watch that alien. Now here's the thing: if I had to choose between that little alien and Trumpy from Pot People, I'd go with Trumpy because he's ugly, but he's ugly in a really, really cute way, and he can actually do fun things. Like the movie has its tonal issues, but at least it knows what it wants to. I can't say it knows what it wants to be because it's either a lighthearted comedy or it's just a teen like it's some sort of dark movie. It's really tonal shifted. It has a really bad tonal shift, and it's really weird. So yeah, it has that going for it. It's not a good movie, but you know what? I'd rather watch Pod People than Mac and Me, and I reviewed Mac and Me, and I wasn't really good at it. Don't watch that review. But I remember the Mac and Me episode. It has a running gag where he's like, "Oh, look at all those cars," and the mother's like, "It is pretty nice," and the Jonah and the bots are like, "Pretty nice," and and now anytime my friend Agnes flat out is like, "Oh, this is actually really good," and I'm like, "Wouldn't you say it's pretty nice?" And she's like, "Oh, god damn it!" And I'm like, that's a good memory I have. And another memory I have about Mystery Science Theater is like when I showed my friend the Manos the Hands of Fate episode. Um, and he didn't. He was gone for the intro, like when it was introducing Joel and the bots, and it got to the intro, and at one point, like he missed the intro, and he got into the movie. He's like, "Oh, what's this? What's this movie?" He's like, "What the hell is this movie?" And he's like laughing at the bots. And at one point during the host section, it was a host segment where they're in front of a green screen or a screen where it's just driving, where they're just driving at the beginning of the movie. Like there was supposed to be credits. Like in the movie, there was supposed to be credits while there was like a driving sequence, not a driving sequence, like shots of like um the scenery while the car was driving. But there was supposed to be opening credits, but there were none because of mistakes. And they had put that in their whole segment, and they're pretending to drive. And then all of a sudden, Gypsy, the robot, comes along and just, comes into the scene. And I remember, like, I was watching this calmly. I'm like, okay, I've seen this before. And I'm like, this is good. And then all of a sudden, my friend's like, he sees Gypsy and he's like, ah. I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, what the hell is that? I'm like, that's Gypsy. And he's like, that looks like a freaking monster. I'm like, no, she's cute, she's adorable. And he's like, what is that? That is terrifying. And then I showed him what Gypsy used to look like in season 0. And he's like, okay, that's much more terrifying. Like, I think Gypsy's cute. Like, very innocent, sweet, and very smart. Well, she has to be because she's helping operate the entire ship. And yeah, and eventually I kind of got him into it. So not not completely, but whatever. He also watched Fire Maidens of he also watched Fire Maidens of Outer Space. Again, he watched Manos with me. He watched High School Big Shot. So yeah, there was that. And holy crap. And I haven't watched Mystery Science Theater in a while, but again, the Netflix revival. I want to watch. Mystery Science Theater is kind of a show where I could actually watch and go to sleep. Not because I'm bored, but it actually kind of lulls me to it. Like, I remember listening to it when I was in uh, New York. Um, and I need to go to sleep, so I listened to an episode on my phone, and I just quietly went to sleep. It wasn't boring, but I heard that if you listen to a Mystery Science Theater episode when you're sleeping, it actually lulls you to sleep because it's just like one of those like it's like this is sweet release, and like you can still hear it in your sleep for about 80 more minutes, and it's like yeah, this is actually pretty good. And yeah, if I don't have much to say about it because I've been going on for about 13 minutes or so, but yeah, it's actually a really good. Yeah, it's actually a really good show to watch. So Yeah, if you haven't even watched Mr. Science Theater, I suggest watching the original series. Start with Pod People. Start with a Pod People episode. Just watch the Pod People episode. That's where they got really good. And then when you're along with it, finally go to actually after Pod People, go with any episode you want because honestly, they're really good. They're all really, a lot of them are really good episodes. They have their flaws, sure, but it's actually a really charming show that could. It's lasted over it's over 200 episodes long, and honestly, it's actually really good. Just go support them because these people put hard work into their craft. Like it's actually a really good show to watch and to sleep to. Not for the boring reasons, but it actually is a very good lull to go with. So, yeah, that's how I got to Mystery Science Theater on Halloween of 2012 when I had nothing to do but just watch a show, and it actually got me to try a couple of riff videos, which didn't go over well considering I only made two of them. But I actually ended up just watching something. I actually ended up going through obscure references. It inspired me to make my own obscure references. So yeah, there's that. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got to Mystery Science Theater. And hopefully I'll do another vlog like this. So thank you.